Okay, the first tool we're going to learn in Photoshop is our brush tool. To find this tool, let's look in our toolbox on the left-hand side, and the icon looks like a paintbrush, and it's in the upper middle portion of our toolbox. By clicking on it once, you'll have it selected. The first thing you need to do with the paintbrush in order to be able to paint on your document is to be able to select a color. To select a color, look down at the very bottom of your toolbox and you'll see two little swatches of color. The one that's on top is your foreground color, and that'll determine whatever color you want to paint with. So let's click it once and it'll bring up a color picker. You can slide the middle bar up and down to choose a different hue to choose from. And from there you can click on the giant square to the left hand side to determine its saturation or its lightness and darkness of whichever color you've picked. The first one I know we want to make is going to be blue, so I'm going to choose kind of a nice blue. And once I've got it clicked, I'll hit OK. What I'm going to be doing for this exercise, at least the first part, is to be recreating each one of these lines. And you'll notice that each line has at first a different thickness associated with it. To change up the thickness of a line, let's look in our tool options at the top left hand side, and what I want is this second box that has a dot and a number on it. This will actually give us controls for our brush that we're using. So I'm going to click on the down arrow and it gives us a pop-out menu. Our first option is for the size of our brush. Sizes are measured in pixels. So right now it says 100 px, which means it's 100 pixels in diameter. I need to set this at 10 pixels. I can do this by either moving the slider, and you see as I move the slider the number changes, or I can simply highlight that number and type in the number of pixels that I need it to be. The second slider is the hardness, and this determines how hard the edge of the brush should be. Right now I need to be working at a hardness of 100%, so I'm just going to bring this slider all the way to the other side. So it's at 10 pixels, 100%. And you can see that even the size of my brush cursor has changed up as well. Since I've got my blue color selected, now when I click and drag, you can see it'll paint a line of that color, that width, all the way through. No matter where I paint, that's the type of color that it will make, type of line that it will make. For this second one, we're going to make a red line, so let's change our color first. Going down to our color picker, choosing red, and hit OK. It's going to be a little bit thicker, and I know it's going to be 100 pixels. Excuse me, it's going to be 50 pixels. So I'm just going to highlight that and type in 50. And again, the hardness is going to be 100%. So now when I paint with this one, it's much thicker line and it's a different color. Wherever I hold down my mouse and drag, that's where it will create a line of color. For this third green line, you'll notice that the edges are a lot more fuzzy. In other words, they're softer. So at first, let's change our color to green. Let's go back up to our brush options. The size of this one is going to be 100 pixels. And the hardness is going to be 0. So let's bring our slider all the way down to 0. Now when I go to make this line, you see that its edge is much softer. Has a fuzzy feel to it because it doesn't have a hard edge like the other ones we've been using. For this final one, it's going to be an orange. So let's choose orange. And let's change its size to 25 points and hardness to 50. And paint it out as well. The color may not be right, but you can tell it's the exact same type of line that I'm looking for. Now for this second portion, I'm going to show you some of the drastic changes you can make when changing up the color mode that you're painting in. First of all, let's set our brush size to 60 points. And Let's set the hardness to 50, which it already is. I'm going to choose a red color, and let me show you a quick way of choosing colors. If you'll look to the right, you have a Swatches palette that has different pre-made colors to choose from. If I was to click once on any of these swatches, it'll automatically load up that color into my foreground swatch. So now I can start painting. The modes that we'll be working with are also found in our tool options. And if we click on them, you can get a drop-down menu to choose from the different modes we'll be working with. Each one does something a little bit different, so let me just show you what they'll do rather than explaining it. So with the red selected, I'm just going to make a line that goes from one side to the other. And you can see it paints normally on my screen. All it's doing is covering up the pixels that are behind it, like you would normally expect a brush to do. Let's change our color to green and change our mode to multiply. Now let's see how the pixels will react differently when I start to paint over them. Aha! Notice that in multiply mode, the green doesn't just cover up the pixels that are behind it, it actually blends with them differently. So continuing on, this is dark blue with a screen mode. Notice that in screen, you can not see the color that you're working with at all on the white area. It's only when you start getting in these middle and darker tones that the color actually comes through. For this fourth one, let's choose orange and change our color mode to overlay. In overlay mode, you're not able to see your color on light areas or dark areas. It's only in the middle tones that you're able to pick up colors. For yellow, let's change it to difference. That doesn't look like yellow at all. Only when it gets to the darker areas do you see the reverse of what it was on the lighter areas. The color actually comes through on the dark black area. Everything else, it remains black. That's because we're working in a different blending mode. And finally, let's choose this hot pink and work in the color mode. Again, drastically different. Each line is no longer just working to paint color on top of one another, but they can actually blend with each other as you paint with them. Keep that in mind when working on different projects. For this third area, let's set our brush size to 50 points. Let's change its hardness to 0. And change our mode back to normal. What we're going to do is shade each one of these shapes by adjusting the opacity of our brush to work with. Just like you would work in watercolor by adding layers of color on top of one another to make the color appear more darker or more vibrant, you can do the same by adjusting the opacity of each color. So I'm going to choose the color red, and if we'll look back up in our tool options, you see the word opacity, and right now it's at 100%. I'm going to adjust it down to 15%. Now when I paint, you see I don't have a dark red that I had chosen. It's only when I start to paint over the area I can build up areas of color to paint over my object. So if I was wanting to add shade to this ball, it may take me several times, but I can very quickly build up the color that I need to work with. Since I'm only adding 15% of the red to each area, And it's okay if you go outside the lines a little bit, but that's what opacity will allow you to do. Oh well, you get the point. If I was to change the opacity up to 50%, or in the, let's see, 50%, and paint a line, you can see that it's a little bit darker and it quickly starts to blend with the other ones. So if I was to adjust it back up to 100% and paint a line, in one stroke you get 100% of that red on top of it. And that's how you would be able to build up colors using Photoshop brushes. For this fourth area, let's set our size to 50 and our hardness to 100%. And I'm going to show you how to make some straight lines in Photoshop. Straight lines are very difficult to freehand draw, but sometimes it's necessary to do. So for the red line that you see here, we're going to click our mouse and hold it down. And then I'm going to hold down my Shift key. With both of these being held down, I'm going to move to the right. And you can see as I move, even if I get my mouse off, it creates a straight line. And back again to the left, to this other point. You can see I'm moving my mouse up and down, but it's still only creating a straight line. Next, I'm going to remove my mouse first, then my Shift key. Be sure to do it in that order. Let's do it again with the blue line. I've chosen blue. I'm going to click once, then hold my Shift, then I'm going to move up and back down. I'm going to remove my mouse first, then my Shift key. For this final one, let's choose our green, and I'll show you how to make straight lines from one point to another. First, we're going to click on this first far left dot. Then I'm going to move to the next one, hold down my Shift key and click once. Photoshop will draw a line from that first point to the next one. Then I'm going to move again, hold down my Shift key, click once, move to the next one, hold down Shift key, click once, and continue going through each one. Photoshop will always draw a line from the last point you clicked to this next one. For this fifth area, it's going to be up to you to choose your own color, your own brush, and your own opacity, and I want you to decorate your name and print it off on the color printer.